Okay, good morning. Welcome to the 2023 Rally Organiser Seminar. We're mindful that it is Mother's Day and lots of you will have lunches booked, etc. So we're going to endeavour to keep it to about 1.5 hours, at maximum 2 hours. We have various topics to discuss with speakers and the use of the Q&A facility, please, if you would, for questions, and then the question and answers will be posted on the website after the seminar. So I've been in post since mid-February. My predecessor sort of left the NTET, if you like, and I was asked to take over. So this is all very new to me exactly in this position. Like I say, I'm still finding my feet, and I know a lot of you have said that there was short notice for this seminar, but there were a number of the General Council that couldn't make dates in April, which is where we envisaged it happening. So we've had to bring it forward. So thank you for that. So please bear with me while I find my feet. So a bit about me, really. My background is that I have a health and safety background, as well as quite a lot of experience within the rally fields. I'm currently involved with about 7 rallies around the southwest of England, 4 of which where I am the safety officer for those events, and some of the others that I do commentary in the ring. And I've been doing that for about the last 12 to 15 years. So that's a little bit about me. I'm also I was also a college tutor up until recently, when I took semi-retirement, and I now work for Somerset County Council in the road transport unit. So thank you. So a number of tasks to address, really, that I've been given already, some of which I've already started. I'm sort of in conversation, if you like, with 3 events where they've got relatively new committees and they're looking for some guidance and information. You know, I'm quite happy in my role to do that. And I've already met with one rally, and we're meeting, David and I are going to see another committee up in Yorkshire very soon. And there's also a rally in Shropshire that I'm in conversation with, and we've yet to sort of set a date to meet. Also, I've been given the task of updating the approved codes of practice and trying to link those where possible to the Purple Guide. And also there are a number of other items that I've been given to do, which I won't bore with you today. So in terms of rally posters and signage and library update, we're looking at renewing the posters, etc., and rally signage, and we're hoping to get that done relatively swiftly. And please keep an eye on the website for that, and we'll be able to let you know what is available and when it will be available. So like I've said, I've already spoken about the codes of practice. We spoke last year in my role as a support for Charlie in terms of training for organisers and NTET monitors. Now those courses are written, and we're looking to get them approved by the General Council, and we will start to roll those out. And like I say, for personal reasons, that didn't happen towards the end of last year, but we're more than happy to sort of set some dates. Now, I'm mindful that to maximise that, it's probably going to be later in the year, so that we can focus ourselves on the rally season. And then after that, we can focus on updating everybody with monitor seminars and organiser seminars as well. So, okay. Progress in the role so far, I think I've already touched on that, as I'm chatting to a number of events that are asking for some support and some advice, and I'm in the throes of putting some things together for those events to happen. Now, we've got my contact details there. Are the email address was the same as Charlie's, rally.chair@ntet.co.uk, and I'm more than happy if you'd rather initially phone me on my mobile, So 07983 174 507. Always better to try and ring me in the evening because, as I say, I'm only semi-retired, so you might catch me at work if you ring during the day. But I'm happy to talk to everyone, or leave me a voicemail and I'll call you back. So thank you for that. Like I said, we have a number of speakers. So what we'll do, we'll hand over now to David.
Good morning, all. David Smith speaking. I was formerly the head of the Technical Services Unit, and I've stepped aside from that role, but I'm carrying on in the role of support, basically looking after NTET systems. And my friend and colleague, Tony Steddon, who you're going to hear from a bit later on, has taken on my old job, and it seemed pertinent that I would deal with this particular subject as Tony's getting his feet under the table, but you'll hear from him later. I'm going to talk about the benefits of being authorised and an event being authorised. There are 5 major pieces of legislation which impact on the organiser of events. There's a Health and Safety of Work Act, of course. There's a Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005, which is very large on events. There's a Safeguarding Vulnerable Groups Act, SVAGA 2006. There's the Insurance Act of 2015. And last and certainly not least is the Motor Vehicles Off-Road Events Regulations 1995. The Health and Safety at Work Act 74 is designed to protect health, safety and welfare at place of work. And it now extends to temporary premises or places not primarily a place of business. We must remember that. And the erection of temporary structures is included, and the use of tools or techniques or equipment requiring special skills, and the movement of equipment or machinery and control of hazards. So anything that's involved with an event such as those that we're talking about today, you can see that they're included in the Health and Safety at Work Act, and we should be foolish to think otherwise. The Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order 2005 also applies to our events. It's a statutory instrument applicable only in England and Wales, such as the effects of devolution. And the order places the responsibility on individuals within an organisation to carry out risk assessments to identify, manage and reduce the risk of fire. It's a burden, but it needn't be an excessive burden. It's something that you wouldn't have normally thought about many years ago other than a glance around the place, but now there's paperwork involved, of course. The order was made into law on the 7th of June 2005, so it's not new, and it came into force in 2006. The reason I'm talking about it is that very little attention seems to be paid to it. Well, this is the second slide on the same subject. The Fire Safety Order provides guidance for businesses and organisations, and I would encourage you to make use of the information that we have and that's also on the regulator's website to see how you might carry out fire risk assessments. They're available in the form of 16 documents and they're published by the government. And here's a snippet of some of the documents that you would expect to see. Have you identified means of escape for disabled people, for example? Open air events and venues. What special provisions are required for open air events and venues? There's a simple 5-step checklist, which we can see and will help us make sure that we've covered all the major aspects of fire requirements, fire risk assessment and requirements. And in particular, we would look at the assessments relating to large places of assembly, over 300 people. I'm sure that's the majority of events covered. But there are small and medium events. For example, if you hold a meeting at your local village hall and invite people to attend, strictly speaking, you should be doing fire risk assessments. And there's the linkage, which we'll put up on the website for you, where you can get to the risk assessments, but they're also on the authorised events library to be seen there as well. So if you are already an authorised event, you will have access to that information. Following these, we've got the Safeguarding and Vulnerable Groups Act, SVGA, as ever an acronym. And this applies to any organisation whose employees or volunteers in the course of their work activities come into close continuous contact with young persons or I should say, are responsible for the welfare or duty of care for vulnerable people. So if you've got, if you're inviting all and sundry to your event, and of course that's the way it usually is, then you must make provision for how to deal with people who are patently, obviously vulnerable or become vulnerable because of developing circumstances. And you have an obligation under this act to put in place provisions to take care of those situations. Quite important. And then we come to the Insurance Act 2015. What the heck has this got to do with me as an event insurer? Well, for some while, in recent years at least, the insurers were being faced with claims for situations at events were patently fraudulent. And a lot of money changed hands before this act was actually brought into place. It's an endeavour to level the playing field and to protect you as the organiser as well. It covers employees and volunteers, and the onus is on the insured, the person who takes out the insurance, to reduce the risk of fraudulent claims. It means, frankly, that you should consider introducing clocking on and off procedures, so that when somebody claims they had an accident, that they were actually under your control, and that there also ought to be accident report procedures. Simple in a way, never thought we should ever have to do it. We're running this for fun, but today's world is a completely different place to what it was 20 odd years ago, I'm afraid. Last but not least, we come to the Motor Vehicles Off-Road Events Regulations, 1995. These regulations were produced in an endeavour at the time to prevent joyriders from having causing accidents in places like car parks or multi-storey car parks, or on premises which were reckoned not to be roads, but where the public were present. Unfortunately, this had a great impact on sports events and on rallies, the likes of which we're involved with. And so these regulations were designed to remove certain acts that could be prosecuted. So they applied their driving license. I just want to remind you, I'm sorry, I'm stumbling here. I want to remind you that driving license regulations or MOT laws do not follow the driver of a vehicle onto an off-road event. But insurance, the requirements for insurance and the Road Traffic Acts do. So ironically, you needn't have a license and your vehicle need not be MOT'd. But the vehicle must be insured and the Road Traffic Acts follow you onto the rally field. Let's see how that develops. The MVR regs provides immunity from prosecution for specific Road Traffic Act offences to those events involving the movement of vehicles where members of the public are present. And I want you to scope this out. We're not just talking about traction engines rumbling about or whatever, or tanks or tractors who are the exhibits. We're talking about the guy that services the ice cream van or brings additional equipment onto the site to cover, say, some additional scaffolding. Anybody moving a vehicle on the during the event comes under these regulations. And so it's important to remember that you can, by being an authorised event, you can actually offer protection to all of these vehicles who are genuinely under your control. It even extends to the car parks if the car park is being managed by your own staff. But if you've subbed the car park management out to a third party, then they are responsible for the movement of traffic on the car park. I just want to make that point. So the motor vehicles off-road regulations is very important to us, because we've got all of that mix of movement of vehicles. We've got the exhibits moving, and we've got supply and support vehicles moving, and the public moving as well. The revised 1995 section 13A of the Road Traffic Act provides that a person shall not be guilty of an offence under sections 1, 2 or 3 of the Act by virtue of driving a vehicle in a public place other than a road if, let's get this right, he shows that he was driving in accordance with an authorisation for a motoring event given under these regulations. So in simple terms, those offences cannot be prosecuted if the event is an authorised event. That is a very simple statement. The offences that we're talking about are causing death by dangerous driving, and careless and inconsiderate driving. None of those 3 offences can be prosecuted if you are at an authorised event. If you're drunk, you can be prosecuted. If you're under the influence of drugs, you can be prosecuted. But you can't be prosecuted simply by, and I don't want to underemphasise this, simply by causing death by dangerous driving or careless and inconsiderate driving. So what's an authorising body? It's a body appointed under the Motor Vehicles Off-Road Regulations. The NTET is an authorising body. There are 13 authorising bodies, and they all are responsible for authorising events in their sphere of influence and interest. And of course, the NTET wouldn't want the Motorcycle Union to be authorising traction engine events, for example. So that's where the NTET fits in. Its duties are fairly simple. It's to authorise those events which undertake to be managed according to a code of practice and to monitor the adherence to the code of practice. And that's the latter part of that statement is important. We can't just take a signature that says, yeah, yes, we promise to behave and run to the book. But what you must do also is consider that every now and again, someone will knock on your door and say, we want to check that you're actually doing what you've agreed to do, and so on. So that's the role of the authorising body. What is an event? Well, it's fairly simple. An authorised event is an event which affords protection to its exhibitors and members of the public against prosecution for the specified driving offences. The organisers of an authorised event have agreed to manage it in accordance with a specific code of practice issued by the authorising body. So each of those 12 or 13 authorising bodies each have a code of practice. We have our own, which is the Rally Organisers Code of Practice. And there's an agreement that the event will be based on that code of practice. More of that later. So what are the benefits of being an authorised event? In no particular order, we've got access to substantial document resources to assist compliance with all the important regulations. Those that I referred to above in my earlier conversation are all information. There is information about all of those on our library. You've got access to event team training sessions. John Y, in his introduction, suggested he's already, as the newcomer, deeply involved with 3 organisations, helping getting their relatively new teams ready for the season, and that's part of the authorisation deal. There's protection for the organiser and the event team from charges of corporate manslaughter relating to specific driving offences. This is an extension of the offences from the driver themselves, because if if without authorization, the organizer was found to be complicit in the acts, the three prosecutable events, then they themselves might be faced with corporate manslaughter. That cannot happen if you are an authorized event. And of course, it then comes down to protection for prosecution for the drivers of any vehicle under the organizer's control for the specified driving offences. So it would appear that we hang our hat a great deal on the off-road event regulations. We certainly do, but there are certainly wider benefits to be had as well, with access to all the training and the attendant documents that go with it. So think on then, why would I be authorized? That last slide that I'm showing you now is the reason I consider you ought to think about being organized. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Alan Holmes and I'm the new Rally Authorisation Officer. Just to give you a little bit of information about me, I took over the role during October last year. Knowledge transfer to me, and there's quite a bit of it, took place during October and November of last year to enable me to carry out the role. I've been involved in the organisation of rallies for many years with different events. I'm currently involved in the organisation of the Great Brexton Steam and Country Show, one of, if not the longest running event in the country. I've also been a rally monitor for the last few years, so I may well have been round and monitored your event. I've been involved in rally organisation for that long that I actually attended several of the very first rally organisers meetings, conferences that were held. So I've been exposed to what's been going on for many, many years. I'm an enthusiast who visits many events each year. You may see me walking around your event with camera slung around my neck. I exhibit models at several events throughout the country, 6 or 7 during the season. I also assist at several events throughout the country. This is the rally authorisation timeline. October, this is the time when the database is brought up to date with regards to events that are currently active, ensuring that safety officer report return dates and events that have been monitored are included. Now, it's a bit awkward at the moment, knowing which events are active and which aren't active because of COVID. So some events may have got an invitation this year that they probably didn't want because of COVID. It's just difficult to know who's active and who isn't. So during November and early December, the authorisation invitations are sent out to all active events, and there were about 80 to 90 invitations sent out this year. From December onwards, applications come in, and once applications have been processed and payment received, authorisation packs are sent out. And that's a process that can continue on through the rally season. So if a new event comes online at quite a late date, they can still become unauthorised and go through the process. During February and March, the data is extracted for the production of the rally list and for adding to the NTET website rally and events calendar. And then during April through to October, hopefully receive and review safety officer reports. Some things that we're looking at for the future to make it a little bit better. At the moment, we request event location, website address, organiser details, safety officer details, police authority details. We're looking at also requesting the public facing details, e.g. postal address if you have for people to write in for information, a public facing telephone number, email address, possibly Facebook, Twitter things that you have. We haven't finalised exactly what we'll be requesting at the moment. The intention being that some of that information can be added to the rally list or website rally and events calendar to make it easier for the public to contact your event for additional information. Also, investigate whether it's possible to send out the application and invitation and authorization pack emails in a slightly different way, as I know several people do have and have had difficulty printing or saving the documents. Okay, this is where we are at the moment. So having sent out between 80 and 90 invitations, so far 59 events are currently authorised. There are 2 events in progress, either waiting for completed application forms or payments. I've noticed that a small number of regular events have not yet applied for authorisation, so I'm in the process of chasing those at the moment. 3 events have decided that they're not holding their event this year and will review going forward next year. You may be aware of some of those. 4 or 5 events have decided they'll no longer hold events for the foreseeable future, or have actually finished holding events altogether. And those are really, as a consequence of COVID, they've either lost the people that were doing jobs, or they found it's no longer financially viable for them to do that. During December last year and January this year, some postal applications for authorisation failed to reach me, possibly caused by the Royal Mail strikes, but I wouldn't totally put the blame there, but who knows. And also some mails have failed to get through. So if you're an event that usually authorise and haven't received an invitation, or you've received an invitation and submitted an application, but not yet received your authorisation pack, please get in touch with me ASAP. And here's how to contact me. My email address, rally.auth@ntet.co.uk. I took over the email address that was being used by my predecessor, Stuart Gaines. There's my postal address there for people that do need to send in applications by post. And again, there's my mobile number. I'm happy for people to contact me, and certainly some of you have already done that, asking about questions in the past. That's it. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Hopefully my camera is working. There we are. Good. Okay, thank you very much. So the next section is on coal and manufactured fuels. So an update from myself, Tom Atwood, for those of you who don't know. This is more an information-based update to hopefully help and give some guidance on what's available and potential options for your rally this year. And there's also a section at the end that I would like to talk through in a little bit more detail when we get there. Okay, so this has been shared before, but I'm keen to keep pushing the message out there. So from the Engine Owners Conference, if you attended or watched that, you may recall some of this information, but let's go through it again because it's really pertinent to the rallies going forward. So the NTET is working on 5 areas to do with coal and manufactured fuels. Number one, as ever, is always to monitor, react and respond to legislation that may impact road steam. And that's always a continuous theme as part of the TSU. But specifically relating to coal, we continue to support Fosse Fran to keep the supply going to the heritage sector. There's a little bit more on that coming up. But this also includes supporting the applications and communication with the Welsh Government as appropriate. We are actively seeking alternative thermal lump coals to see if they are available and viable. We are driving the development of manufactured fuels for the road steam sector. And again, there's more on that coming up, which is pertinent to rallies. And we are supporting the development of the long-term future of manufactured fuels. And finally, really, one of the important ones that we need to keep developing, and there's more work to go, is communication and education of coal and manufactured fuels. And I think this is very important to rallies. So I urge you as organisers to consider your fuel choices, which can be coal and can be manufactured fuels, but equally some of the messaging that goes out to the wider public and how that's appropriate to your event. So just to share the visual that has appeared before, but I think it's quite a good one if like me, you like to see things visually. This is the same sort of information showing how this is a long process starting in 2022. Obviously, we're now in 23 and where we're up to. So the support of Fosse Fran is ahead. There are thermal coals available and we're looking at what's viable and practical on that front. We have done an awful lot of work in developing manufactured fuels for road steam, so more on that coming up. And I'm pleased to say we're starting to creep into the green category of seeing some longer term manufactured fuels with materials that support that endeavour. Okay, so let's talk specifically about coal. An important message at the top is, as of May this year, it is illegal for merchants to sell house coal to the domestic market in England. Okay, it's very, very clear that that's in England. It doesn't affect Scotland and Wales. However, the important message out of that is steam coal is exempt along with anthracite and clean burning manufactured fuels. So those should all still be available at some coal merchants, but we need to talk about that in a bit more detail. Fosse Fran coal supply was heavily disrupted in the last 6 months. That's definitely been no secret, and I know supply to various merchants had dried up. However, in the last few weeks, that supply has been healthily restoring to most coal merchants, and of those that I tend to phone round and try and keep a finger on the pulse of what is actively available, they have stock or they have waiting lists which are now being fulfilled relatively quickly. So that is good news compared to where the situation looked 6 months ago. Obviously, it's been a bumpy ride with Fosse Fran over the last sort of 14 months or so. An important update on that, which has been shared before and is continuing to progress, is the planned application for an extension to the mine, which would see approximately 1.7 million tonnes over 3 years, is progressing and is due to be submitted shortly. The NTET's role within this is to support alongside the Heritage Fuel Alliance this application as required from the stance of the heritage sector. So that's important, and a lot of work that won't be seen has gone on this in the background. So do understand that we are doing what we can on that front. In terms of other coals, there are other coals available at different coal merchants. Now, this is really hard for me to try and tell you where to look for these fuels, because various independent merchants have different coal stocks left. Obviously, they don't have the ease to sell that coal onto the domestic market anymore, shortly anyway, which will have an impact on what they stock. However, I would urge you to speak to your local coal merchant or local merchants within your vicinity, and particularly those that you know service rallies, maybe other rallies as well, and just get a feel for what they do have or are comfortable to stock. And then finally, in terms of coal, I mean, it's no secret that there is Russian coal available in Ireland, which was purchased before the embargo. So it's up to you to decide whether you're comfortable with using that or not. That's a personal decision and not one which I give judgment on. It is available in good quantities, but generally it needs importing over in bulk loaders. A bulk loader is typically 28 tonnes, so it's a significant quantity, but not beyond the reach of maybe a handful of rallies or groups getting together if they feel, this is the appropriate fuel and option for them. And there's a few coal merchants that are willing to do this. Okay, so having spoken about coals, let's touch upon the manufactured fuels again. So in the Engine Owners Conference, I mentioned what I've been referring to as the golden ratio in a sort of light-hearted way, I suppose. But this ratio still seems to be proving relatively true. So fuels that are manufactured with up to 50% anthracite, typically 30 to 50%, and then 50 to 70% bituminous coal and or pet coke mixed in there with a resin binder, either hot or cold pressed, seem to be the ones that are working the most successfully for the road steam application. Based on the data feedback sheets from the trials last year, which if any of you took part in, thank you very much. These are the top 4 manufactured fuels that had positive feedback for our sector from the road steam sector. And wildfire in particular is obviously a topic that I've been pushing quite a lot recently. So hopefully you've seen some of the updates, and there's more coming out in various magazines. So we'll cover that one specifically because I think that's an important one to rally. So this information is shared with you so you know that there are different options out there, not all just from one company, and there's potentially other manufactured fuels from smaller producers that may suit this ratio and suit your event. So it's worth exploring if you can. So again, I wish to update on this slide from the Engine Owners Conference because a lot has changed in the last few weeks. So I shared this basic traffic light system referring to an overall summary of manufactured fuels. So generally, the majority of them have worked successfully for the majority of people in rally field use. So by that, I mean the normal sort of steaming up, trundling around a rally field, you know, normal light work, and including a small road run or a visit to a local hostelry, etc. So being successful in that avenue for most people, which is a good situation for rally organisers. Perhaps in the yellow category, then we have normal road use. So by that I mean covering a reasonable distance on the road with living vans, trailers. For the most times, you know, for most people, this was okay, very good in some cases, a struggle in others. So it sits in like a yellow category, more work needed, if you like. But where we definitely saw issues was around the high demand uses. So to put that into context, my review of high demand was Showman's Engines trying to run high demand rides, you know, so demanding rides, heavy haulage activities. And in this category also sits some road steam vehicles that need a fuel that's performing well to run on the road. So my example there would be like a Sentinel, where we proved out we had difficulties with manufactured fuels in a few cases on such a vehicle. So that was the situation as of earlier this year, back end of last year, earlier this year. If we move on to the next slide. CPL issued an announcement to us in February to say that they had significantly reworked wildfire, and this was based on feedback from the heritage sector, but with a significant influence from the road steam side. And I have to say it is a significant influence from the road steam side. CPL were present at Bedford Rally when we attempted to trial using some of their fuels in this high demand application, and I see the organiser of Bedford Rally is on, so thank you for your support in helping us do that. And that's proved key to how this fuel has been adapted to suit, hopefully, the road steam application even better. So this iteration of wildfire is in the marketplace now. It has superseded wildfire, the original version, so it is what is commercially available, and has proved very successful in the applications we've trialled it in so far. So please keep in mind, obviously it is early days. The fuel was only announced to us in February, and obviously we're now only in mid-March. So a lot has happened in a short period of time and out of season as well. So it's not always easy to get engines in steam, etc. So hopefully to help explain this a bit further, and you may have seen the updates that we've put out in social media and in the newsletters, etc., and they'll go out in different magazines. We have trialled this now on my Foden wagon, so we've done about 30 miles in total. Some friends have used it on their Burrell single crank compound traction engine with very good results. And again, we tried to extend this to include a high demand application based on our data previously, where we knew we'd had difficulties with manufactured fuels. So we extended this to a Sentinel S4, where over 40 miles, I say over 40 miles in total, actually the total on that vehicle is now approaching 60 miles. but we did 40 miles in a single trip in very hilly country in parts of Wales and Shropshire, with good results, which have been shared in more detail on the NTET website, newsletters and webpage. So there's still more trials planned with this fuel, including a road train in hilly country and a 3-speed road loco. I've said here a 3-speed Foden. What I should have quantified there was a C-type. So mine is obviously a 2-speed, but a C-type, where the demand is higher, for those of you that are familiar with that type of engine in terms of the demand on the fire. And we also wish to extend it to a single cylinder and some miniatures. The comment about miniatures is very important. Bedford allowed us an opportunity to extend using a scaled down version of a manufactured fuel with a number of different miniatures, and again to give some data back. Now CPL, who produce Wildfire, are aiming to have this type of Wildfire blend available in the miniature size as well. A trial batch of that is being produced at the moment and should be with me in the next few weeks. So obviously we're keen to get that out to a few miniature owners to trial and give feedback on. Excuse me one moment. And then at the bottom, you'll see 4 pictures from the trip done with my Foden. So obviously the reason for sharing these really is if you're familiar with steaming engines and behavior on the road. The first picture shows obviously the fuel going into the firebox, but what's important here is the long yellow flames, that sort of ability for the fuel to light when it's chucked into the fire and produce this long yellow flame, which is a desirable characteristic for, to show the fuel is burning, igniting well. The second picture is the ash pan after 20 miles. So as you can see, a healthy glow across the bottom of the firebox, some ash falling through, but most importantly, the ash is falling through, and not a huge amount of it compared to the earlier reports on manufactured fuels, if you recall, from events like Pinckney's Green, for example, last year. And excuse me, the third one is the smoke box after the run. And again, compared to some of the early iterations manufactured fuels, I would say this is completely on par with coal, no real difference at all. The fourth picture I've put in purposefully because it's important for you as rally organisers to know this. Shows what happens if you heavily fire with a manufactured fuel. So this is after putting on, obviously a Foden firebox is quite small. This was 6 shovelfuls put on in one go. It does produce some smoke. It clears within about 90 seconds to 2 minutes. But the important thing here is it's not acrid and thick and rolling smoke. It's a similar sort of haze, I would say, or smoke, for want of a better term, as Fosse Fram produces. Now that is probably an important factor for some rallies in particular to consider based on your location and your target market, etc. that attend. Okay. So just going back to the traffic lights, I'd like to update them, hence this slide. So without going back over it in painful detail, the important thing here is I'm beginning to gain confidence and data to say that this version of Wildfire is performing very well for the majority of people in road steam use. So rallies would almost certainly be well covered by it, as would normal road use. And then I've cheated slightly by mixing red and orange, which you shouldn't really do when showing traffic light systems, but tough luck for the high demand use. We're beginning to see some promising signs here. Those tests need to be extended further before I could comfortably conclude whether we're moving into a yellow category or even a green. But the point is, this is a good step forward from where we were just 6-7 weeks ago. So I share that for your information and to make your own judgment on. Excuse me. And then to always provide balance, and it's something that is repeatedly being asked, and rightly so, is a few things on the technical sides. Like everything, there's positive and negative. So I'd say 2 positives are the clean burning nature of the fuel. So if fired, gently, or even in the example that I've included of where I put a lot on in one go, it produces some smoke, but it's not filthy smoke. That, as I say, that might be important for your event based on your target market and where you're located. And I think generally clean burning is a positive image to portray where possible. Wildfire, this version of Wildfire also contains about 30% biomass, using a natural byproduct from the oil industry. So it's a product that otherwise would have been wasted. we're not necessarily pushing this as a major thing at the moment, but what is important is that may be important to you as rally organisers to use a fuel like this and be able to talk about the adoption of biomass and not necessarily moving away from fossil fuels. It's certainly far too early to be making those sorts of claims, but perhaps to start selling the story of the positive steps that the movement is attempting to make. So that I leave for you as organisers to decide how you wish to portray that message. On the negative sides, the consumption is a bit higher. I very much doubt that will be the case in rally applications. I would anticipate it will be a similar sort of consumption, but certainly when the fuel is being worked on the road and in some of the high demand applications, we're seeing about 20% more being used. Now that number may come down as we trial it more and become familiar with its characteristics and how it behaves. But again, as event organisers and considering costs, it's something you should be aware of. However, I do stress the point that under normal steaming conditions, I don't anticipate there being a big difference. The reason why I say that is when steaming up, I personally and the others that we've trialled it with have used about the same amount as coal to get the engine up to full steam. So for an engine on a rally field to be steamed up and perform in an arena and general running around, it's going to be a similar sort of quantity. The final potential negative, and unfortunately can't fully quantify this one at the moment, is there is a different smell to the fuel compared to coal. I personally don't think it's unpleasant, but I'm not always the best judge. So everyone who's trialled it so far, I've tried to push them to give feedback on the smell. It is different to coal, but not offensive. You'll see from the table at the bottom, there is a higher percentage of sulfur compared to fossifran. Fossifran is sort of higher in sulfur in the first place compared to some other coals. So you do detect a little bit of sulfur smell. But again, I don't think it's overly offensive. The thing just to bear in mind is, obviously we haven't been able to trial this with a number of engines in close proximity to each other like a rally field setting might be. So something to think about where perhaps engines are positioned, how close they are together, yeah, those sorts of constraints. I include the table at the bottom because this is being asked more and more, so that the comparison between the fuels. I don't particularly intend to talk through it every category in there. It's sort of shared, so you can review at your leisure really. The important one from last year was the concerns raised around chlorine. So you'll see from natural coals like fossifran, it has a very low 0.07% chlorine content. E-coal, I left this figure in here so you could see that actually some of the earlier iterations of manufactured fuels saw quite a high chlorine content. This was caused by the molasses used for the binder. CPL did a lot of analysis work with the railways on this after the railways in particular expressed concerns around depositions forming on copper fireboxes. It wasn't something we particularly saw in steel fireboxes, but there were perhaps traces at times. So the new iteration of Wildfire has moved away from molasses. In fact, it just moved away from molasses, uses a resin-based binder, and that's brought the chlorine levels down to on par, comparable with coal. So a huge positive in that respect. Okay, next slide. The difficult one really, and it's difficult for all of us, is cost. Now, obviously the NTET is monitoring these costs, and I spend a lot of time looking at the markets and how that reflects on the end product cost to us. However, we can't influence the cost. Coal is a traded commodity. The price fluctuates on market demand, and market demand has been extremely high as a result of the European energy crisis. It has come down a little bit, but there's obviously a backlog of stock to be used that was bought at that higher demand price. There's various distributors that have got that stock that they bought at a higher price. So I would hope we will see a small drop in costs over time, but unfortunately nothing looks imminent on the horizon. Okay, so the next bit I think is really important, and I sort of share this with you bravely, and I want you to take this message very clearly away today, is what can we do? Okay, so from the NTET's point, I'm currently seeking what financial assistance may be available through the correct representative bodies to support the heritage sector for events like steam rallies in the future. in bold, and this is the message that needs to be taken away, is this isn't presently available, and at this stage it is a concept that we're working on with a body known as the Heritage Alliance, but there's other facets within that, which I think is a really powerful group of people who have access to the right channels into government to put these ideas forward. So just to be clear, that isn't something that's available yet. It's at concept stage, but trust me, it's something we're working hard on now to put forward as an idea and seek that support if it's available. So that's what we're doing, but what can you do? Well, this is where I really do need your help, and quite quickly, if you are able to do so. To put that case forward, we need case studies of how costs, not just around fuel, but perhaps in terms of marquee hire and toilets, etc., how those costs have changed from let's say a pre-COVID point in time, because that seems to be a cleaner point of time to take. So 2018, 2019 rally costs versus the costs of 2023 of laying the same sort of show on. If you're willing, I would greatly appreciate you putting together a small summary of those costs and sharing them with me via email to the Coal Trials email. It doesn't need to include your profit and loss for the rally. I'm not remotely interested in that. What I am interested in is purely how those costs have increased from one year to the next, and any comments you wish to make on how that impacts your event. That would be really useful, and the sooner I receive that, then the sooner we can build this portfolio together and share with the representative bodies mentioned above. So that's what you could do to help me. Thank you. And here, just to conclude, I mentioned some of the suppliers of various fuels. Obviously, I can't list every coal merchant in the country, and obviously they will vary in what they stock at the moment based on what supplies they can get hold of. However, there's a few here, some of the ones that I speak to regularly, and their contact details, which may prove useful for you if you're seeking fuels for your rallies. So this presentation will go out in another form, so don't worry too much about trying to scribble them down right now. Okay, thank you very much. Oh, and finally, I nearly forgot the important bit here. So we have a webinar coming up with CPL on the 28th of March, which will go through in more detail manufactured fuels, hopefully answer any questions, and equally we'll pose various questions to CPL. So it should be an interesting, informal and informative webinar coming up. So I hope you'll be able to support and be interested in it. Okay, that really is it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tom. Nice to be here. Nice to see you all. Well, not see you all, but nice to be here with you all today. Quick introduction. I'm Tony Seddon. So I head up the TSU for NTET, taking over, as Dave says, from David. To be fair, we've got a really good team around us now with Tom and others on the team that will help us move forward with the technical sort of aspects of what we do. I'm an engine owner. I've got lorries, cars, tractors, all sorts of old vehicles around us, and I've been involved with vehicles for, well, all my life really. I've just been anything with wheels. I've always been up for playing with it, and got involved with the steam slide too many years ago, more years than I care to think about now. And I'm glad to say that my not so small children are now involved as well. So the future's looking good. So I've been asked today to give you a quick sort of talk on insurance. Dave's already touched on the regulations around that, so I won't go over that again. It's a serious subject, the actual discussion. I'm going to try and make it a bit more interesting for you. I'm trying to make it not death by PowerPoint. I'm not going to give you all of the answers because we just don't have time today, but I will point you to where you can find that information. I will share a version, an edited version of the notes that I'm using today, just to give you the information, so you'll have that. You will need to sort of listen, and I'll try and keep you awake. And you know, I'm sure some of you are taking notes. It might be worth doing that as well. So So the talk that I've sort of entitled today is who needs insurance anyway? I mean, surely all exhibitors have insurance, and there's very little risk out there because they're all insured. Well, I'm going to ask you a few questions throughout this presentation, and it's a very quick sort of whistle-stop presentation, but the questions will come out there. So we've got the next slide up already, which says why. Well, why do you need insurance? Well, insurance is an important part of every event, and it's there to protect the event organizer and those working or visiting the event from any risks that they may face in terms of their sort of liabilities. So if we can move on, please, now. So the next slide says when. Well, when? Well, when do you make the decisions about what insurances that you need? When should you be starting to consider it? When should you be looking to get that cover in place? Well, the decisions about what insurance cover you need to have should be an early decision in the planning of any event. You should be thinking about that at the very, very start. And it should be based around very careful risk assessment, sort of looking at the risks of your event and covering all aspects of that risk and covering all aspects of the event. And you should be sort of thinking about that very, very early on in the very, very first sort of stages of planning. And if you've already run an event, then you've probably got that well covered. But if you're new to it, it should be one of the very first considerations. Okay, so we'll move on. So the next slide is who. So who needs cover? Who should have cover? Who needs to be insured? Well, we've got a number of people who actually should have cover if you're looking at your events. So the first one being clearly the event organisers, because you as event organisers are responsible for the activities that go on your site. And clearly not to have some insurance in place to cover those activities would be foolhardy at best. The next bunch of people who need insurance would be landowners, and it's something that sometimes people may overlook. So at the end of the day, the landowner, whether it's a farmer or an estate or whatever it may be, will have members of the public entering their land, so they will need to have some cover in place, and they'll need to. They may already have that, but they'll need to inform, and make sure that cover covers for your event. Then we've got suppliers. So we've got suppliers who bring equipment or facilities to your site, and that would be things like the marquees, toilets, and all of those other things, including sort of the other bits and pieces that you might use, so fencing or whatever it may be. We've got attractions, so you might have arena attractions going on, for instance, and they will clearly need to provide their own level of insurance for those activities that go on your behalf. Then we've got exhibitors, so the people who are bringing equipment, such as, well, ourselves bringing our engines, or people bringing cars, tractors, whatever it may be, mobile or static, steam and internal combustion. We've got working and static displays, etc. So you've got a number of people who are exhibiting who would also be expected to carry a level of cover. Then we've got trailer rides, potentially. If you're doing trailer rides on your site, that will clearly need insuring, because the public are partaking in that, effectively a service, and so you'd need to cover that. We've got food and drink outlets on your sites. So they've got public access and they supply to the public. So clearly, again, that's another one. And then lastly, but not leastly, fairground attractions that you might have on your site. Now, there may be others that I've not covered there, but there are quite a lot of people, as you can see, who clearly will need to carry some level of insurance, and we'll talk about that shortly. Okay. So I've just bunged this one in here because I want to make sure that everybody's still with me and still awake. So if this was being done as a normal sort of in the room thing, I'd be talking to you and trying to gauge reactions. So I thought I'd throw some nice pictures up just to try and wake you all up. So the pictures there are our two engines, both in working day and in the current sort of format. So just for entertainment and to make sure you haven't fallen asleep on me. So thank you. We'll move on again. Okay, so what cover should people have? And this is quite an in-depth sort of slide, I'm afraid, but I'll go through it as sensibly as I can with you. If we categorize them, so let's look at event organisers. So if we look at event organisers and the basic must-haves, clearly you're going to need some public liability cover. You'd be very foolish not to carry that sort of level of cover, because you've got members of the public coming onto your event and you are sort of responsible for them in many ways. So PL cover, public liability cover, covers sort of their third-party liabilities. It can be anywhere from about 5 million upwards, and it could be more than 10. What I would suggest that you do is you consult with your the local authorities, or people who are sort of regulating, if you like, your site, and I would also suggest that you consult with your insurance brokers. Excuse me. Okay. Another one that, as event organisers, you really need to have in place is employers' liability. So employers' liability insurance covers against sort of compensation claims against you from people who are working on your site. So typically, and that's a 10 million minimum cover, and that's covering your employees, temporary staff, volunteers, helpers, and that's whether they're paid or unpaid. So you need to ensure that that is in place. And then we move on to things like hired in equipment. So you might have hired in plant insurance or covering all sort of risks in those areas. And that covers equipment that you're hiring in. I would suggest that you really should be covering it for the full replacement cost, and you'd need to consult with your suppliers on that. You might also then go on to consider things like property damage or risks cover. Cancellation cover. So cancellation cover in this day and age is probably something that's worth considering, and it might include for things like insurers wanting to pay for trackways and things like that on your sites, rather than risk full cancellation because the weather's been inclement in the week before, and it might be worth considering those sorts of covers. And then, of course, you've got people paying out. More people than ever are now paying by card or electronic payment sort of portals. But typically, you might want to carry some cash cover, because if you're handling substantial amounts of money, clearly there's a risk of theft there, and so you may want to consider that sort of insurance. So those are sort of a whistle stop of the event organisers, and then we move on to landowners. I talked about landowners earlier. So landowners will need to advise their insurers, their existing insurers, that the event is taking place on their land, and potentially they may need to increase their covers or take out suitable public liability insurance for that risk. And then we move on to exhibitors. So if we start sort of breaking those exhibitors down into different areas, we've got exhibitors, trade stands and entertainment, I should say, sorry. So if we look at the trade stands element of it, clearly they're going to need some public liability insurance. If we look at working demonstrations will again clearly require some public liability insurance. Now, mostly those working demonstrations will be fenced off. If it is an enclosed area, which is not a public access area, there isn't really the requirement for moving vehicles to have RTA in those areas. However, Road Traffic Act insurance, sorry, in those areas. But if the public do have access, then clearly that will need to be in place if you've got moving vehicles. Move on to static displays, stationary engines and pedestrian controlled sort of equipment. That again will need some form of public liability cover, and that may also come in the form of club policies, and that might be a suitable insurance for those elements. Excuse me. We've got vehicles. So if we sort of start to look at vehicles as tractors, lorries, cars, etc., they'll clearly need to have some form of RTA insurance where we've got public access, although that's sort of in place normally because they've come to the event usually on the road. So those would need to be in place, excuse me. And then, of course, if you're providing trailer rides, I would suggest that you will need some public liability insurance, and I would ask that you or suggest that you don't rely on the drawing vehicles insurance. You might be having fare paying passengers, you may not, but clearly you want to keep it as a fairly clear and concise sort of definition that you've got insurance in your own right on that. Moving forward to the sort of steam side of it, we've got steam engines in sort of two categories here. So we've got steam engines that are mobile, so they'll need their usual RTA, boiler explosion and sparks and ashes covers. If we've got steam engines that are static, stationary type engines, with the steam side of it, they're going to need public liability insurance, boiler explosion and sparks and ashes cover. And it's worth noting that that may be in the form of a club policy again for some of the miniature side of steam. And then moving forward, just briefly to touch on drivers, Dave's talked about the off-road regulations. So it should be said that the RTA conditions, Road Traffic Act conditions, apply if it's not an authorised event under those regulations. If it is an authorised event, then we can look at the drivers under the age, under the normal licensed age and unlicensed drivers on those events. Typically Steam Apprentice Club members, and they have to be bona fide members, and typically those would be a minimum age of 13 and over 1.4 metres while they're being supervised by a licence holder. Now this was rolled out a little while back, and it did expand to tractors and that type of equipment, and again the age of 13 applies, and they would need to be a bona fide club member to participate in that. It's clear to say, even though we've said those things, they must have insurance that covers the underage driver in place, because clearly it doesn't just give them carte blanche to do as they would wish. So the rules on that are contained in the Rally Organisers Code of Practice in section 2, and I'll give references at the end as well, so give you some time to get some notes together for those. So if we move on, please. So where can I find evidence? Where can I find evidence of steam engine insurance? The NTET have a disc scheme. If we pop the disc up, please, now. Should be a click on the slide. There we go. I've thrown one of my discs on there, but the disc scheme is in place. It's a really, really useful way of evidencing the insurances at a glance. And you all have access as authorised events. You can get hold of the information, and you can get hold of the information in advance by consulting on the systems that David's developed. So that's a really useful thing to do, because it saves you trawling around the event on the day. You can usually get that information in advance, and the discs are there. And Louise is on the call, on the seminar today, and Louise can handle some of that information as well for you. And the paperwork side of it, you could, if there isn't a disc in place, have a look at the paperwork for the engine. It's a little bit more complicated. You need to know a little bit of what you're looking at to ensure it's adequate, but you can do that. It is possible, but we'd recommend the disc system because it's taken that hassle away from you. Okay. So the next slide I've put in, it's what questions should we ask? So when arranging your own insurance, so that's the insurance event, insurance for your event, there are a few key points that you probably should really consider about this. First one being, don't be put off with insurance speak. So don't be afraid of asking questions of the brokers that are providing your insurance about cover levels and things like that, and exclusions as well. Seek their recommendations, talk to them about it, tell them what you're doing. Usually I've found that insurance brokers and insurance companies are pretty helpful and have a good rule of thumb. So have a conversation with those. Make sure that you've given the broker everything that they need. So I would ask the question of them, have you got everything you need to give me the appropriate quote? Is it something that you need? Do you need something more from me? I'd I would also check with them whether the insurers need sight of any of the risk assessments or plans or policies, etc., that your event has, and they might want to also look at security arrangements and stuff like that. So it might be worth checking that as well. Well, it certainly is worth checking that with your insurance brokers, insurance companies. And then when you've got the insurance cover in place and they send you the documentation, I would highly and strongly recommend that you check the cover and the exclusions that are within that cover. So what you might find is that there's a term or a condition being put in place, and you might inadvertently be uninsured if you miss something. So it's definitely worth spending the time to read the small print and check that over. It might, for instance, say things that you have to do. For example, checking third-party insurances, etc., in order that you've got that cover in place and you've got it maintained. So definitely worth spending the time to look through that documentation and make sure that you know what you've got a cover for and what you need to do. And I know it may sound silly, but make sure you keep the records, because and records of the conversations and so on that you've had, because you may need to rely on that if something went wrong. So definitely keep the records of all that. Okay. So what should we do next? That's the next question. And if we were sat in the room, we'd be bouncing these things off you, but we can't do that in this format. So what should we do next? Well, I would look at the notes that you've taken today. I would do some more reading on the detail behind what I've spoken about. I mean, this is a real whistle-stop tour. There's a lot of information available to you as events, and I'll point you to that in a minute. But certainly spend some time reading up on the detail that I've spoken about. It'd be worth your time to do that. Okay. So as I said, where can I get information from? So we've got a couple of sources of information that have popped up on the screen there, both of which are available to you. If you're an authorised event through the NTET scheme, the Rally Organisers Code of Practice, which is linked on the page there, is available to you free of charge if you're authorised. Two particular sections that will be of interest in relation to this part is the Code of Practice section 7, which covers insurance, and also section 2, which covers the licensing and the bits I talked about the steam apprentices and people like that driving on the event. So those are the two sections in the Code of Practice. And then the other one, which I've noted on screen there, is the Events Industry Forum's Purple Guide. That's a guide for running those types of events. It is a really good document, and I'd point you to that document as well. Section 31 in that guidance talks about insurance, and I'll give you a bit sort of further reading and a bit more information behind this. Okay. So we're coming towards the end, you'll be pleased to know, but what do I need to remember? What should you take away from this today and take forward with you? So the first bit, don't leave it to the last minute. Insurance takes time to get in place. You need to spend the time reading and checking the bits and pieces out. So you need to give it time at an early stage in the planning sort of your event, as I say, and get that in place. So don't leave it to the last minute. Don't be put off by jargon. I've mentioned this before. Never hesitate to ask for an explanation to ensure that you are getting the cover that you want and need. Make sure you understand what is being put in front of you and spend the time doing that. Make sure that all those involved in the event are adequately protected by insurance. So that doesn't matter who they are. We've been through all the list today. So that could be something that you want to consider. Make sure that organisers should ensure that all suppliers have current and suitable and adequate cover. So it doesn't matter who they are, landowners, exhibitors, etc. It should be in place, and that they've got that cover in place, and you've made sure that's happened. Do risk assessments. Look at your event and use risk assessments to assess what you really need to ensure is covered and what you need to insure for the event. So make sure that the extent of cover is suitable, and assess that using sort of the risk assessment type format, and look at that sort of level. And then just to remember, some insurances are mandatory on that, so you need to be making sure that you've got those in place and that they're all dealt with. Okay, so that's it in a nutshell. I note there's a question in the Q&A bit. I'll just give you a quick explanation on that. So it says, please explain insurance for trackway. Well, if you look at the information comes from the Events Industry Forum, and they suggest that if you've got cancellation cover on your event, if the weather is looking inclement, and the ground is getting to a point where you're thinking, will we be able to run or won't we? It might be worth consulting with those insurers, because they may have part of that cancellation cover that they provide to you may provide for putting something like a trackway in or whatever, because actually the loss to the insurer, the underwriter, will be less to do the trackway as it would be if you cancel the whole event. So that's what I mean by insurance for trackway. So I hope that's answered the question, Phil, that you've asked, and that covers it out for you. Okay, and I think Dave's answered the other question that came up while we were talking. So that's me. I think that's everything that I needed to cover. Thanks very much for listening. And if you want any more info, we'd be glad to help. But thank you very much.
Good morning on behalf of the STEAM Apprentice Club. My name is Louise Maunder, and I'm holding the post of Disc Administrator and also as Vice Chairman of the STEAM Apprentice Club. Unfortunately, Nick Bosworth, the Chairman, is not available today, so I'm here instead. May I start my presentation by talking about our driving days, please? As both a volunteer with the STEAM Apprentice Club and mother of a young and very, very keen apprentice, I would like to take the opportunity to say a heartfelt thank you to all the rallies and the engine owners that offer our apprentices a fabulous experience offered by our driving days. Having the opportunity to work with an engine and its crew for an entire day in the safety of a private venue is an invaluable experience to our youngsters. We appreciate the amount of work and effort that goes into organising these days, and we really do hope that they are mutually enjoyable and rewarding. Within the STEAM Apprentice Club, we are always keen to expand the number of driving days that we offer to apprentices, and we would be delighted to talk to you about running a day if you felt that this was something that you would be able to consider. The main requirements for running a driving day are fairly simple. The requirement is access to a private venue and the ability to coordinate a small group of engines. These can be full size or miniature or a mix of both. These need to be able to run on that side. It can be held as a standalone event. It can be a day held prior to a rally or as part of a club running day. We are able to assist you with advice on the paperwork required, and we are very able to help you with ideas of how the driving day may be run. We appreciate the generosity that's been shown by our current driving day organisers, and understand that the costs of running any event are a major consideration and just keep increasing. We'd like you to rest assured that the NTET values the apprentice driving days greatly, and so funds have been made available to help if that is required. The applications from the apprentices for the driving days are handled by the STEAM Apprentice Club. So this enables us to ensure that you're only going to accommodate a suitable number of apprentices for the number of engines that you have available on site. If you think that this is something that would be of interest to you and your rally or your club, please feel free to speak to us at any time. We would love to hear from you. May I have the next slide, please? Thank you. Young driver guidelines. The guidelines as they stand now were developed during the days of the early STEAM Apprentice Club. They were designed to safeguard young drivers, primarily on full-size engines. As alluded to by Tony, the guidance at present outlines a requirement for the apprentice to be of a minimum age of 13 and a minimum height of 1.4 metres. And indeed, this still makes sense on full-size engines. However, the picture on the rally field has changed with a dramatic increase in the number of miniature engines. These engines are often owned by families, which their children use, and many are owned by engineers who wish to encourage youngsters to learn the skills that are being lost. The NTET can see the importance and value of miniature engines as part of the road steam movement and as a crucial learning tool for our apprentices. Therefore, we are in the process of updating our documents to include a set of guidelines for running miniature engines at public events by reducing the age and the height restriction for these miniature engines. We're hoping that this will enable younger and smaller drivers to be fully involved with miniature engines without compromising on safety. Both sets of these guidelines stipulate that the youngster must be accompanied by a responsible adult who is ultimately responsible for the safe running of the engine. This is aimed to safeguard the apprentices, the public, the engine owners and the rally organisers alike, whilst bringing interested youngsters into the full involvement with the engines. And this is something that is essential to the long-term continuation of the road steam movement. Next slide, please, Naomi. Thank you. Steam Apprentice Club Playpen. Last year at the Great Dorset Steam Fair, with the generosity of Martin and Oliver, we were given a large area outside the NTET marquee. This was roped off and a safe route was made to bring miniature engines into the ring. The aim was to allow Steam Apprentice Club members the opportunity to drive with volunteer engine owners and their engines in a safe area, an area separated from the public, from the full-size engines and from the heavy haulage. This proved to be a great success, with over 140 new apprentices signing up during that week to take part. A byproduct of this was that it brought the miniatures down into the heart of the show, and the Steam Apprentice Club Playpen soon became a spectacle in its own right, drawing in quite a significant crowd. This summer, we have been invited to have playpens at other events. However, as we are a very small band of volunteers, this will have to be restricted to a small geographical area. But once we have trialled our ideas this year, we hope to be able to increase the number of teams involved, which will enable us to start rolling this out across the country next year. The long-term aim is to have the playpens run by members of the Trust, assisted by the Miniature Section Rally Coordinator, or possibly local model club representatives. We will keep the playpen concept very simple, whilst allowing youngsters some driving experience, a new area for the miniatures to run in, and hopefully a new point of interest on the rally field. We hope this will serve both to encourage more youngsters into the shows and a way for the rallies and clubs to engage with the youngsters that live in their local area who already show an appetite for road steam. If you feel this is something that would be of interest to you and your rally, please get in touch with us so that we can work together on this new venture. May I also take this opportunity to say that we are always looking for any ideas or thoughts on how we can work with you to bring more youngsters into the world of STEAM. I'm sure we can all agree that it is key to the continuation of our much loved STEAM rallies, and any ideas that you have would be greatly valued. Please send any ideas via the General Secretary of the Trust, Naomi Cornish. Her email is general.secretary@ntet.co.uk, and that's up on your screen. I would also finally like to take a moment to return to the value of miniature engines, not just where the apprentices are involved, but as an important feature of both road steam and of our rally fields. Miniature engines are often passed over as they are misunderstood as not having a part to play in the heritage steam. This is not only incorrect, as scale model engines have been around for well over a century, but also unhelpful to the great work that miniature owners do in encouraging new people into the hobby, including myself. This is why the NTET has chosen to take time this year to focus more on miniature engines and ensure that 2023 marks the start of these engines receiving the recognition that they deserve. To you as rally organisers, I would like to say that having a central point for the miniature engines to run in created a great deal of interest from the public at Dorset, much more than I anticipated, and is something that I would strongly ask rally organisers to consider. The miniature rows at rallies are often quite cluttered. Caravans, vans, gazebos in between each engine. Yes, a big appeal of the miniatures is that you can stay near your accommodation and your equipment, and that is very valuable to many of the owners. It is important. It allows many people to join in where mobility is an issue, and it keeps the family groups involved. I'm not suggesting for 1 second that this should be changed. My point is that it's not ideal for the spectator, and I believe it leads to a large majority of visitors not seeing the beauty and meticulous engineering that the engines are displaying. Far fewer photos of these engines appear on social media and in publications after the rallies, which may also be related to their location within the average event. When the miniature engines appear in the main ring, people gather to see them, but their time in this area is brief. So if your event has the space and can offer the miniature engines a dedicated area to meet or run in, a gathering point if you like, then it may prove beneficial in so many ways. Thank you for listening to me, and I wish you well for your rallies over the summer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I think that was very, very informative, and thank you for the time and trouble that people have gone to put these presentations in place. And thank you to our authorised and non-authorised members that have attended today. I would like to just stress that all the slides will be available in the Rally Organisers library on the website. Okay, and please feel free to contact any of the presenters with their details that were given earlier if you have specific questions. I've answered some questions in the Q&A chat, and I'm sure that my other colleagues will be looking at those, and the questions and answers will also be published on our website. So please be assured that there is ongoing support for you in every guise that we can manufacture. Okay, my contacts are there, rally.chair@ntet.co.uk, with my phone number 07983 174 507. Please, if you ask me a question and I don't know the answer, I certainly, to quote the AA, if I can't fix it, I know a man who can, or a person that can. And all it's left for me to say is thank you very, very much. Have a great rally season and have successful events. And if I or my colleagues can support you in any way, shape or form, we will do our utmost to do so. So we look forward to hearing from you and to coin a phrase, seeing you in the flesh at your events. So please take care. Thank you very, very much. It is just now coming up to 12 o'clock. So being a busman in the past, that's pretty good. We're still running on time, and I wish you the rest of the weekend and a successful rally season. Stay safe, stay healthy, and please stay in contact. Thank you very much.